blessed unity with the L-O-V-E. Love is the solution, so set your love free with the L-O-V-E. Further evolution and blessed unity.
Good morning. Welcome back to the Self-Love Show. I'm your co-host, Dawn Light. My beautiful sister, Trish Wright, is taking midterms today. So it's just us today. I have an amazing guest, and we're trying out something new this week. Before I introduce Philippe, I want to just say to our viewers, thank you for tuning in weekly. We're so grateful for you to be here. Check us out on all the platforms. We're everywhere, podcast, YouTube. And we are moving our show to a impactful 30 minutes. So we're just going to just pack a powerful punch, really deliver the self-love tools, tips, and all the just giftedness that come with this beautiful show. And so we're trying it out just to see if we raise our viewers' listener ability, because it's a little bit shorter. So we're just giving it a trial run to see how this works. And so today's show will be 30 minutes. Okay, so yay. So without further ado, I have an amazing friend here with me. We've known each other quite a long time. He does powerful work in the world. And I just want to really introduce Philippe Lewis. So he's here to talk about the journey to secure attachment. And what does the journey to secure look like? What are the insecure coping mechanisms you are aware of? And what skills have you developed to care for your insecurity such that they no longer need to come up? Philippe is a passionate relationship educator and founder of Exquisite Love, with a mission to empower men and women in making informed and positive choices for themselves and their partners. Philippe guides individuals on a transformative journey to become sovereign beings through the art of connection, trust, consent, intimacy, and love. Drawing from the profound insights of attachment theory, he helps people explore the depths of human connection and understand the dynamics that shape their relationships. So thank you, Philippe. You are such a gift to this world doing this work. And I'm just so grateful for you to be present today.
I'm glad to be here. I was just, the first thing I wanted to say is I was present to what we were doing just before the call started. And like you had us like take a deep breath, and you called in some guides, called in the light. And as you were doing that, I was just realizing, oh, she's creating a regulated moment. This is great. We had a little bit of technical questions, and that happened at the last minute. And I was like, this is good. This is kind of a good way of approaching a call that otherwise might have felt dysregulating.
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine that you learned this just over time. You realize like, oh, this is actually helpful. This is making me feel better. This is giving me a sense of grounding and a sense of a sense that everything is going to be okay, which then grounds you in your reality in a way that it doesn't feel forced, that feels like just right.
Flow. It initiates flow state for me, and I do it often through the day, and especially tech issues. When tech issues come up, I definitely have to do it then. So thank you for acknowledging that.
So you can imagine. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to dive right into the heart of the conversation. So tell us about, for our viewers, give us a short synopsis of secure attachment. Some people might not know what attachment theory is at all. And let's dive into the heart of the conversation around, helping people with coping mechanisms, right? What are the coping mechanisms, and how can we find our way to secure attachment?
Beautiful. So you could say that secure attachment is a template, is a nervous system template. It happens best and most, like imagine you're born as a baby and you're learning everything, and we're massively adaptive creatures. Like we're more adaptive than any other animal on this planet. And this makes us better at surviving. And the way we do this is by interpreting what's happening around us and kind of making corrections around how to better engage with reality around us so that we're better able to survive. There's primal mechanisms that allow us to do that. And this begins to happen as soon as we come out of the womb. And it happens for the first 10 months of a baby's life. So it's as simple as, depending on how the parent shows up, the baby is already learning how to hopefully better engage back with their parent or their caregiver. So they will be fed better, they will be attended to better. So they're of course having all these physical experiences. They don't even know they're a person yet. They don't even know they're a baby. They don't even know that this caregiver is a caregiver, but already their brain is trying to figure out, how do I survive best in this world? So what it doesn't know is that it doesn't have a reference point for what that looks like. So the reference point actually comes from the caregiver. So the caregiver, the more skin to skin, the more feeling of like comfort, and the skin of the caregiver is against the skin of the baby, and the more eye contact, the more it gives the baby a reference point for what survival, for what a sort of relaxed but aware survival looks like. And so if the parent does a good job, then the reference point is good, and it creates a solid template for how to survive effectively in the world. But if the caregiver is not that great, then the learning of the template becomes a little crunchy or a little wonky. And it can lead to three different attachment styles depending on how the caregiver engages. It can lead to anxious attachment, which is a tendency towards needing a reference point for emotional balance. They could lead to avoidant attachment style, which is a template that basically says that you need your own space in order to find your own regulation. And usually it's because the caregiver wasn't so present, or was perhaps too intense, and then the baby needed to take some space internally. Or it can lead to a disorganized attachment style, which is what develops if the baby is faced with something that feels dangerous. So these three different attachment styles are like templates that are supposed to help the baby survive better, but they're very primal. And as the baby develops into a child, and develops into a teenager and a young adult, the problem is that these coping mechanisms and these templates are no longer nearly as effective. And so part of becoming secure, or gaining and earn a secure attachment style, is to realize how these coping mechanisms are no longer effective, no longer serving, and then slowly taking steps towards an earned secure attachment style. So that's the basic idea.
Amazing. So such good information, because it really helps you understand your reference point around how you're showing up in relationships, especially your
Absolutely.
main relationship. And so this is the key ingredient information everybody needs to like research if you're interested in relationships, period, right? Which our whole life is relationships. Let's just be honest. Work relationships, friends, all kinds of relationships, intimate relationships. So it applies in every area of life.
Mhm. Every way that you relate to a thing or a person or a concept is going to be colored by your attachment style in some way.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. So tell us more about, I'm so curious about, I mean, I know about these things, but for the show's sake and our viewers and listeners, I would love for you to explain a little more about coping mechanisms, and like give us the gist and the juice here around how does that affect our attachment style, and what goes on in that language, right? Because it can show up in people's coping mechanisms can be radically different for each person. And so tell us more.
So there's two categories of coping mechanisms. One of them is called anxiety, or and some people call it hypervigilance. So you're watching your environment to try to figure out what's happening so that you can better engage with it. But it goes into overdrive. For somebody with an anxious attachment style, or somebody with a disorganized attachment style, they're worried about, well, for the person who's anxious, they're worried about being abandoned. They're worried about that their anchor is going away, or
Yeah.
they're going to disappear, or they're going to be abandoned.
Mhm.
And so they're watching for every little detail that will give them a hint that their person is no longer going to be there. But they're watching so intently and so hard that, first of all, it's very hard on their own nervous system, and it's also hard on the nervous system of everybody else around them.
Mhm.
So it's intense. There's its own version of intensity to be around somebody with an anxious attachment style, because you can feel like they're watching everything, and it can lead to other people around them feeling like they're being watched, they're being scrutinized, they're being criticized. There's all kinds of ways that this can occur to other people, while the person with anxious attachment style is just trying to figure out if they're going to be abandoned. But it doesn't occur that way to everybody else around them. Like, they're not thinking, oh, it's almost like this person's inner child is afraid of being abandoned, so they're just doing their best not to be abandoned. So that's one type of coping mechanism. It also shows up with somebody with a disorganized attachment style, but slightly differently. They're hyper aware because they're afraid of danger, but it's a similar kind of a hyper awareness,
Mhm.
but it's watching for danger. So not just abandonment, it could also be that, but they're watching for danger, as if so imagine if you grow up with a parent who could blow up at any second, then you become hyper aware. You watch for every little glitchy behavior from your parent, because what if they're going to blow up in the next second? So you have to be ready for that. Your nervous
Mhm.
system is just fine tuned, but also that kind of hyper awareness can lead to hyper arousal, which is also exhausting.
It's exhausting. That was my childhood. I had to learn
It's
to
not
become
good.
secure inside myself, regardless
Yeah.
of that's been my journey at 49. So I've had a
Oh,
while working on it, now. But
yeah.
I can honestly say I had one parent that was very secure emotionally and loving and like grounded and anchored and loving and applying love with me, and which was my mother. And then my father was
Mm.
explosive and rageful and angry and moody
Oof.
and disconnected at all times of his life. Not He never
Yeah.
did inner self work. He didn't have a
Mhm.
inner inquiry at all. He never
Mm.
learned to regulate his own emotional state
Yeah.
ever. And so that
Yeah.
transferred into blame, shame, wronging, and wrong making.
Yeah.
And so I learned, I modeled both things. And so as a
Mm.
young one, it was really confusing, and thank God for my mother, because she played her role in part too, and I had to examine all of that stuff, but that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
But as far as attachment styles go, I'm so thankful for my mother, because I leaned towards like, okay, I want to be vibrationally aligned with love and anchored in that place inside
Yeah.
myself, and so grateful for her.
Mm.
So grateful she was there for me and gave me that consistency in
Mm.
that way, and always talked to me. She was always very, very keen to like tune into me and explain things and talk to me, even though she had a very more Christian kind of perspective about things. She was still so loving, and that really set me up for success in life.
Mm. So she was a good reference point for you.
Definitely a deep, good reference point for me.
Yeah, and simultaneously, your dad was a completely different kind of reference point, and that must have dug really deep into actually kind of extricate yourself from the almost primal belief at some level that maybe a partner or somebody or anyone around you could just blow up at the drop of a hat, to actually get yourself out of that belief or away from that nervous system kind of
Oh,
wiggliness.
yeah,
That
I had to do
that takes
a
time.
lot of work around men, around men being safe and feeling safe in the man's presence, and like I developed women friendships really easily over my life, but I had like all the issues with like men and men relationships, and so for me to be married to my beloved for 20 years is a testament to show that I broke the pattern and I married the kindest man that I could ever find in my life. I was like, oh my
Mm.
God, he's secure. He has loving
Mm.
parents. Both of his parents they've
Yeah.
got their own, everybody's got their own curriculums. They're not exempt. They're humaning too. And
Yeah.
they are very securely loving people. And so I
Beautiful.
moved
Beautiful.
through my journey. I moved through,
Mm.
what was, I could have chosen disorganized or anxious. I had to work through anxiousness too, but I've been journeying towards security, which is so beautiful. Having a family
Amazing.
gives you
That's a
the,
real blessing.
it's such a blessing. such a blessing. A lot of healing. Oh my goddess, how much healing, healing, healing. I've
Yeah.
spent my life. That's why I do what I do, because I've spent my life healing.
Mhm. That's one of the beautiful things about going through a healing process is that you understand the journey.
Mhm.
And so when you speak to others, you actually give them a reference point for what it looks like to actually having gone for what it looks like to have gone through that journey and made it.
Yes. Yes. Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. And you did the same for your clients in that way, which is beautiful. Yeah.
Well, I'm actually really blessed to be, probably in a similar situation as your partner. Like I don't recall a time that my parents either lied to me or betrayed me. There is
Wow.
nothing in my psyche that has that. So when I encounter people who've gone through that and actually are behaving as if people around them could hurt them, which they have in the past,
Yes.
it's baffling to me.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's baffling at all the levels. And
Yes.
so I've had to learn to be to be in relationship with people who've had a lot of trauma
Mhm.
from a place of not knowing what that looked like.
Yes. Yes. That's such a
No
look.
reference point of that.
Yeah. And this is so good because there are people that are very, very fortunate that have two very loving parents, but then the work of their work in the world, like yours, is to learn
Yeah.
how do I how do I bring more compassion and understanding and sensitivity and tenderness and care and
Yeah.
compassion to what this human and with me is experiencing in the moment, because you
Yeah.
could tell their system is completely dysregulated, and it has nothing to do with the moment happening ever. It's
Mhm.
always an imprint from the past surfacing.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is a long journey. Like people ask me often, like, how long is, how long is the journey to secure? My usual answer is 3 to 5 years if you're lucky.
Mhm.
And it's not lucky, but if you do the right things, you surround yourself with the people that continue to act as reference points for what secure looks like,
Mhm.
rather than being surrounded by reference points of people who are insecure, that
Mhm.
will continue to engage with you from an
Yes.
insecure place. Now, there's also something to be said about being on a journey with people who are on the same journey as you are. And when you're trying to take steps to become more secure, they see that and they also follow, they do it with you. So
Right, and support you.
there's a belonging there's a belonging to a secure network, and there's a belonging to a cohort of people, like you have your friends who are like on the same journey and you feel like
Yes.
you're on the journey with them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That is so good that you reference that and speak about it, because so many of us, we want to be with our beloveds as we grow and evolve and change, and it is
Uh-huh.
important to acknowledge and really tune in. Is this person growing with me? Are they on the same similar path, or do I have to weed the garden? Sometimes I speak of it in those terms, because
Totally.
there's people that just keep showing up no matter how much you say, no matter how much you give them information, no matter how many times you give them chances and
Yeah.
really opportunities. But if they're really never going to shift their behavior and they're constantly bringing
Mm.
forward chaos, trauma,
Yeah.
sometimes we have to lovingly take a step back and for self-regulation and self-honoring choices. Like, I can no longer put myself in that place because it's dishonoring of my own energy,
Mm.
right? And
Mm.
those are such challenging moments. I've had to make some of those choices in my own life for my own well-being. You know,
Totally.
I mean, I had to move away from a whole toxic work environment that they didn't understand, and I was very judged every time I got back from graduate school. Like, I was
Mm.
so open and alive and feeling so grounded and connected, just beaming the light, right? And then I would have to
Mhm.
go back into this toxic work environment, and the people there felt like I was leaving them behind because I was growing and expanding. But they wouldn't say it in that way. They would say it in a very diminishing, demeaning, ugly, nasty, and they would try to do things to kind of pull my vibration down. So I had to
Mm.
weed my garden of these relationships that weren't like family members, or you know what I mean?
Mm.
They were just a work environment. And I
Yeah.
just had to really deeply examine that. And that was me choosing to be secure in myself and say, I'm
Mm.
choosing my spiritual path. I'm
Mm.
choosing myself fully. And even if
Mm.
they can't understand it, that's so important, right? To like, because God's gonna, spirit, whatever you want to call it, is going to put into your path the people that are highest aligned for where you're headed, for your spiritual
Yeah.
path.
As I'm listening to you, I'm also realizing part of the path of people who are on that spectrum of anxious, um, which includes people who have an anxious attachment style and disorganized, but for different reasons, as I mentioned. Part of the path is to actually weed out. There's more of a, because the tendency is to lean in towards relationship. The path is to actually find a better balance,
Mm-hmm.
where you basically have to lean out. You have to find your own way. You have to find your own individuality, your own sovereignty. You have to learn to say no. So there's a lot of like
Oh my gosh.
a lot of learning to no longer lean in by default, but to actually find. And at first, it can look like pushing a lot of things away, and it can look like and feel like being avoidant. But really, what you're learning to do is to just not lean in so hard anymore. And then you eventually find that sort of that middle of the balance point, that middle balance point, which is this sense of just right. It's
Mm-hmm.
just right. And you find the right people that can support you, that you don't feel like, you no longer feel like you're leaning in hard with, and they support you in that. And that's part of developing the right kind of secure network for you. Now, I
Yeah.
want to go to the other kind of coping mechanism, which is avoidance. So, and it's on the, if you look on the sort of the map of attachment, there's the two axes. One of them is anxiety, the other one is avoidance. And it's just basically, they just measured as these two different kinds. Secure is low on both. They're low avoidance, low anxiety. They can find the just right really easily because they have a good reference point. They've had a good reference point, and you continue to find it, and the life works.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who's anxious is low avoidance, obviously, because they lean in, and the high anxiety, which is always watching for what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody who's avoidant is high avoidance and low anxiety. It could be said that there's anxiety somewhere underneath, but it looks sorry,
Want
it
some water?
looks different. Yes, I have some water actually.
Yeah.
Mm,
Good.
thank you.
Take care of your throat.
So high avoidance is related to somebody who can easily be overwhelmed. So somebody who's avoidant tends to be very sensitive. And part of the reason is because they haven't had the reference point of what it feels like to co-regulate effectively. Either their parent wasn't around, or for whatever reason, they didn't have enough skin to skin eye contact. So they never really learn how to co-regulate.
Mm.
So being close to people means that they get overwhelmed really quickly, especially when the other person has big emotions.
Yes.
And so they don't know what to do with it. And the tendency is to either get dysregulated and sort of dissociate,
Mm-hmm.
um, or the tendency is to actually have one foot out the door, or actually leave in order to find regulation, because that's what they learn. They learn that auto regulation, to regulate by oneself, is the best way to do it.
Yeah.
And co-regulation doesn't occur as a good way to go because it's too overwhelming.
Right. Oh wow.
So the tendency is to lean away.
Lean away. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, if you put an anxious person who's leaning in and an avoidant person who's leaning away,
Now.
it eventually leads to a kind of tango dance.
Yes.
I'm not going to go into that. That's a whole other episode that we should go into at some point. But the idea is they're not compatible, but they could actually heal each other, because they each have a piece of the puzzle that the other person doesn't have.
Yes.
So we can go into that some other time. But the coping mechanism of avoidance means that the avoidant needs to learn to feel their own
Yes.
emotions without getting overwhelmed. Learn what these emotions are, because they never learned it from their parents. And learn to be with these emotions with another person, or be with another person's emotions without getting overwhelmed. That's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
From somebody, with somebody, if you're talking about somebody who hasn't learned any of those things, to go through this process basically means that the avoidant has to go into like their own period of anxiety, because they're going to get stressed, really dysregulated from all the emotions that they're feeling or another person is feeling.
Or they're not feeling their own emotions. They're afraid of
But,
feeling emotions.
but they will have to
They
in
will
order to
have
become
to in
secure.
order
That's
to
it.
become secure.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
here's the thing: the emotions happen no matter what. It's
Yes.
whether or not they can feel them, and you can't integrate your emotions and make sense of them unless you feel them. So the journey to secure for an anxious person, for an avoidant person, is they have to feel their own emotions, and they have to validate them. And once they start doing that, they realize, oh, other people have emotions too, and they're valid too. And once I
Yes.
understand what's going on for me emotionally, then I can take care of my own needs, but effectively, not just last minute when I can't not. And I can do that with other people too. And it actually allows me to start leaning in and have better connections with them. So the avoidant person goes from coping by leaning away and having one foot out the door and auto-regulating, and slowly they have to kind of start to lean in and feel all the emotions, feel the emotions of others, notice how it dysregulates them, try again and try again and try again, and develop a greater capacity to feel for themselves and with others.
Mm-hmm.
And as this capacity develops, they start to lean in, but not too much, but lean in a way that is secure, that is normal, and towards co-regulation. Because co-regulation, they discover eventually, is it's so much faster, it's so much more effective than auto-regulation. Auto-regulation takes time, it's slow, it's glitchy, it takes you away from everybody, and by the time you come back, some people are like, where were you, what happened? And if you can lean in instead, then the result is you feel better faster, there's people there to support you, and they actually feel more connected, and they start to trust you better.
Beautiful.
Now, that's a pure avoidant version. The disorganized version of avoidance, because disorganized is high in avoidance and high in anxiety, is the avoidance of disorganized is in order to survive. Like, what if your dad blew up in front of you and you don't have a place to go, you can't flee, so you dissociate. You leave your body, you find ways to numb out so that whatever's happening doesn't bother you. That's a disorganized version of avoidance that serves to create safety when there wasn't any.
Yes.
When the person that blew up in front of you, where was the person who was supposed to give you the reference point for safety? So the discovery when you're young, when you become disorganized, is you can create your own safety, but it's a very lonely safety. And the truth is, you never know that you never learn what it looks like to be safe. You just know that you're safe in your own little bubble, but you never learn to be safe with others. And so part of the discovery and the journey to secure for a disorganized person is to learn to be safe with others. And it looks like both leaning in and also finding one's own sovereignty at the same time without being avoided. So they have to do both journeys at the same time, the journey of anxious and the journey of avoidance, but from a place of looking for safety and really getting the reference point for what that is. So having your own safety, not because you're running away or you're trying to cope, but because you got this. And also leaning in because we're safer together. When you find the right people, you're safe. You're much safer in numbers than you are by yourself. So
Wow.
that's the journey for each of the different attachment styles. And it looks very different, and it's very difficult to understand the journey of another attachment style unless you've really looked at this together with a partner or with other people, or you've studied it. It takes time to really get that it's a completely different journey. It looks very different, but it leads to the same place, which is
beautiful.
secure.
Show us your slide you wanted to share today before we wrap it up.
Well, initially, I thought I was going to teach you a tool, which is essentially this. But for the sake of time, I'm going to show you the slide because that's where I was going. So, and I'll tell you the questions that I usually ask my clients.
Okay, great. Love that. So you might want to hit here it on the back end. So you might want to hit present again.
Yep, I'm going to do that right
Yeah.
now. Okay, so this is the first infographic that I ever created related to the journey to secure, and it came from the question, like, where am I? Where am I on the journey to secure? Like, where am I? You know, am I just getting started? Am I doing well? How far have I gone? And then I learned about this concept called the skill building ladder, and it's basically goes like this: like everything you learn, you start by being unaware and unskilled. You're lacking skills, but you don't know anything about that, and you don't know enough. So you're just basically clueless. And then eventually you start to practice this new skill, and you become more and more aware of how unskilled you are. And then eventually, with practice and teachings and readings and studying, you actually become better at this thing. So you gain awareness and you gain skill. And eventually, if you do it for long enough, you gain a level of mastery where you actually don't have to. You gain so much skill that you're aware, and your awareness is so pervasive that you sort of become you don't have to be aware of every single step. And you see this with dancers who have been doing this for a long time, or musicians. They're not thinking of every little thing that they're doing. They're just doing it. Same thing for you when you're on the highway and you're driving while you're speaking with a friend. You're not thinking of every single thing, but you are fully aware. So I translated this into the journey to secure. So it starts basically with being unconsciously insecure. So that's stage one. So you're basically, things are just happening to you. Coping mechanisms are happening. You think it's everybody else's fault. Whatever the journey from anxious to secure, from avoidant to secure, or from disorganized to secure, it just looks like it's everybody else's fault because you're not aware of your own insecurities and your own coping mechanisms. But over time, and if you live long enough and you have enough good people around you to give you the kind of reflections that you feel safe to receive, or maybe you're just smart enough to start noticing the pattern, then you start to realize that these patterns are yours. You're the common denominator of a lot of the things that are a lot, or most of the things that are happening to you. And these patterns become so present that you become aware of them, and you start to realize that quite a few of them are due to internal insecurity. And so you become consciously insecure. You become consciously aware of your insecurity. And this leads to the next natural step, which is, what do I do about this? Like if I'm aware that I'm insecure, like, is there a way that I could learn to become more secure? And so you start to catch yourself in those moments of insecurity. You start to catch those moments, and you realize, oh, I could have done this. That would have made things easier. Or I could have asked this question of my partner instead of assuming that they meant something that I thought was bad. I could have set myself up just a little bit better. And slowly but surely, you start to learn the skills of either becoming more regulated, or the skills of regulation, the skills of self-care, or the skills of sense making. So you're looking at what happened and you understand what happened so that you can catch yourself just a little bit better or a little bit faster. So initially you catch yourself months later, then you catch yourself like a week later, then you catch yourself a day later. Oh, this happened yesterday. I could have done this so much better. And you also start to recruit people to help you. And this is the long journey from stage 2 to stage 3, where you slowly become conscious of your journey, and you become consciously secure. And that's the journey to becoming earned secure, so to speak. And then eventually, when you do this for long enough, then you're not really thinking about it anymore. It just, your life works. You catch yourself when little things happen. You barely go into fights. Whenever insecurity shows up, you understand that maybe you could have done, you understand immediately how you could have done things better. You even start to foresee ahead of time how to better engage with your life, so that the insecurity doesn't even show up. You have check-ins with your partners. You have debriefs with your partners. You even set things up ahead of time, saying, hey, just in case I feel bad about this, like, how about we set this up a little bit better? You can do this with your partner, you can do this with your friends. And whenever your partners or your friends or your coworkers are having insecure moments, you receive them with a lot of compassion. You say, totally understand. It makes total sense. I'm so sorry you're feeling that way. How can I help?
Mm.
And in doing that, you're actually supporting them in moving from stage one to stage two, or from stage two to stage three. You're showing up as a support, not for your sake, but for their sake. And they feel so little judgment that they can actually receive the feedback. Like I mentioned earlier, you receive the feedback, they receive the feedback much in the same way that perhaps you received feedback at some point in a way that was non-judgmental, where you were able to say, oh yeah, I do feel insecure about this, or I do feel bad about this, or something was too much for me, something was too little for me. And the receiving of it without judgment is essentially what parents do with their kids. And you start to receive these reference points from people in your life that are secure, the same way that you could have or should have received it as you were a child. And this is what begins and supports your journey towards secure, and eventually you become the person who does that with others. And
Mhm.
that's how you know you're moving from stage 3 to stage 4, because it becomes so pervasive in your life that you have a lot of latitude and a lot of bandwidth to actually be that secure reference point for others, with all the compassion and all the love and all the support that you now have, because your life works. You're not at the edge of not having enough bandwidth. You have so much bandwidth and so much goodwill that you can offer to people, that it gives them a sense of what it feels like to have that. And you become the reference point for secure. So that's the journey to secure in a nutshell.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful for those that are seeking this information. And it's laid out so beautifully by you. And I'm very grateful to hear the journey and all the hard work you've poured into this. It's beautiful to see your devotion to teaching people how to become secure. It's everything. You know, emotional intelligence is our key ingredient to successful relationships. And this is emotional intelligence at its best.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to add something to that. I also have a whole system of 7 intelligences, and emotional intelligence being one of them. But I also believe that there's such a thing as what I call primal intelligence. Like underneath all the emotional things that happen to us,
Mhm.
there's something that happens at the mammalian brain level, at the level of the mammalian brain, which is the primal level. And you notice it, the more you look at this from a primal perspective, the more you notice it in cats and dogs and other animals. And the more you notice that your own emotional well-being, as well as regulation and dysregulation, and how you go from one to the other, and how easily you can go back to regulation, that's highly influenced by what's happening in your animal body. And so a lot of what happens with regulation is, and especially co-regulation, is essentially helping your animal body calm down. And that trickles up into how your emotional well-being, and that trickles up to the ways that you engage socially with people around you. So
Mm.
you can always look at this from, how's my animal feeling right now? When you're dysregulated, your animal is just like very tense and looking around and making sure everything's okay. Yeah. Or sluggish
Mhm.
when things are too intense or tired, or they're tired, the animal's tired. So one way to look at this is, how do I feel in my heart? What's my emotional state right now? But you can also like start to look at deeper, like how's my inner animal feeling? Like if I could imagine my inner animal next to me in my mind's eye, like how would my animal be?
Mm.
And that's just an exploration. Like maybe it's true for you, maybe it's not, but it's I find that my clients find it very
Helpful.
useful. Yeah, it's
Beautiful.
very helpful. Yeah.
Robin says hello. Hi.
Hi.
um, just want to thank you for being on today's show and just give you like such praise, because this is very, very impactful information for those that need to know how to become. If you're curious about how to become secure, then let's reach out to, Philippe here. And I'm just going to post your current offering in the chat. If you, those that are listening, can come to
Mhm.
yes, the Journey to Secure stages. So let's do this really quickly. Give me a second to post all these posts here. But for those that are listening to the podcast, you want to go and reference it at the Self Love Show Facebook page, and you can find all the information. Grab these great links that Philippe is offering us today. Tell us a little bit. Fill us in on what are you offering today.
Okay, so when you go to the link that Dawn is about to post, you'll see a lot of different things. Because my studies have taken me in different directions, mainly three different directions: emotional, primal, and somatic intelligence. And so for me, emotional intelligence is essentially what's happening in your heart. What are the emotions that are coming up? Becoming more emotionally intelligent, was part of my journey as somebody who used to lean more avoidant, having to lean in, having to feel into my own emotions, having to learn about emotions. And so I did my own journey in becoming more emotionally intelligent. Then there's primal intelligence, which I've just touched on just a little bit, which is essentially your relationship to your inner animal and developing that as a lot of great benefits, including around sexuality. Like most people look at sexuality as a very emotional thing, which it is. But there's also a very primal aspect to it. There's also a very somatic aspect to it, which you would look at from the perspective of orgasms and pleasure and how does it feel in the body. A lot of my offerings relate to one or more of these three. So I've taught a lot of classes that are supporting people in developing their ability to speak through touch, which is sort of a subset of body language, but that involves actual touch as a way of speaking and understanding what's happening in another person's body, and in another person's psyche through the language of the body. I also create a number of different events that help people, events and classes and class series called the Somatic Playground, which is supporting people in learning about these different forms of intelligence. And then finally, and mainly for this particular podcast, I co-lead and organize and created a course called the Journey to Secure, and it's happening in Northern California, July 18th to 23rd. And then basically we bring in a cohort, like a group of people that become for each other their own little secure network, and we all come together to support each other and for them to support each other in becoming more secure through taking a number of steps that relate to developing skills around regulation, self-care, and sense making, and also resourcing with each other. Like, how do we use each other to learn to become more secure by being reference points for each other? How do we learn to regulate ourselves and each other through co-regulation? How do we learn to self-care and supporting each other in caring for ourselves by caring for each other?
This is amazing. And this is July 18th, you said?
July 18th to 23rd in Northern California. We have a beautiful venue called the Inner Sanctum, and there's a large pool, it's a big room full of light, and together we'll take some steps in becoming more secure. And when we did it last year, two people spontaneously came to us and said, separately, "This is the most safe I've ever felt in my life."
Oh, that's so healing.
And it was just beautiful to be present to that, and the group had such a kind and sweet and safe feel to it that to have people come out of it was both completely delightful and also yeah, of course, because that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel the same way about the retreat offerings I've been giving too. Like the women felt very close and connected and rich and deep, and it was the most amazing container. And it's not I wasn't coaching around security. It was deep spiritual psychology work, but it's still at the same time it felt very loving and deep and rich and rewarding. And I walked away feeling like, wow, that was epic. So I get the offering of like how deep people can go in an intimate container. And I just want to thank you for being on the show today and offering this beautiful work into the world. Like, I want to encourage our viewers, go grab these links and check out Philippe and just, if you're desiring security inside of yourself and learning to be a securely attached person, this is it. So I celebrate you. I'm so grateful to know you, and this offering in the world is just such a gift. So, and I just want to say thank you to all our viewers for tuning in weekly, and thank you to our muse. Scott Katamas was our muse to birth the Self-Love Show so many years ago,
He's
and
amazing.
it's so good. It's so good. And we're so grateful for all the help we've received to make this happen weekly, including our virtual assistants. Thank you so much. We love you, appreciate you. And, all the pieces that bring all the resources, all the time, all the devotion, and all the pieces of people, especially the people in our lives for Trish and I. And especially, I love you so much, Trish, that we get to give this gift to you weekly. And we're just so freaking grateful on every level. It's a labor of love, and we do this in devotion so that our consciousness can expand and we can learn the tools to be the most amazing humans we've come to be, and our spiritual beingness fully arrived here, all right, and give our gifts. Like, that's what it's about. So we celebrate you, we love you, we hope you have an amazing week, and we're going to do this again next week, and see you then.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank
It's a
you
joy
so
to be
much.
here.
Yes. Okay, bye-bye, have a good week.